For this weekly reading, we are using the Everyday Witch Tarot. If you want to see what food for thought it has for us, stay tuned. Let's adjust it just a little bit so that the glare isn't blinding. The cards are super glossy, so they're very reflective no matter how I move the light, but later when they're flipped over I'll make sure that there isn't a glare like that. And while I'm at it, I'm gonna move our mermaid over here so that we can see her face and it isn't hiding behind the card. Hi, it's Leia. Welcome to this episode of Diaries of a Witchy Creative Life. As you saw in the intro, this is our weekly reading and we are using the Everyday Witch Tarot for this one. That deck is one of my absolute most favorites. If you're new here, well, first of all, hey there, and secondly, to give you a little intro on our readings here, they are not predictive. Our focus when we use tarot on this channel is to do shadow work, which is to dive beneath what's obvious so that we can reclaim parts of ourselves that we've cast aside or are in denial of or have dissociated from for whatever reason. Sometimes it's because we are ashamed of these parts of ourselves, or maybe there's some sort of fear there or embarrassment. In any case, just because we've swept these parts of ourselves under the rug, that doesn't mean they don't come up to the surface to affect our lives. So coming face to face with them is a way for us to begin the journey towards accepting these parts of ourselves again, to find some sort of peace with them. If that sounds interesting to you, check out the other videos on this channel because that is pretty much our focus here, doing shadow work and healing. So let's dive in. We aren't following any spread. Instead, we are looking at the cards one by one to see what questions there are for us here based on each card's meaning. Here is card number 1. We have number 18 from the Major Arcana, the Moon. So the moon is about mystery. It's very fitting for doing shadow work because that's pretty much what it addresses. When we really take the time to look at ourselves, what we see may not be what we've been projecting outwards or plastering on the surface for everyone else to see. And like I already mentioned earlier, the shadow actually comes up. Sometimes not very obviously, but it pokes its head out, and those who are observant do notice that. So you might feel like you're this super friendly person, but someone in your life who's pretty insightful might have already picked up on anger issues, even if you try to hide it. So yes, I know that generally we do shadow work here, but let's do focused shadow work right now. And some of you may already be familiar with this exercise, but maybe you'd like to go along with it, especially if it's been a while since you've done it. On a piece of paper, write down the name of someone you absolutely dislike. And then, underneath their name, write down what you don't like about this person. Maybe there are 10 things that you can come up with. Shoot for at least 5 so that there's something meaty for you to work with here. If necessary, I actually would like you to pause this and do that for a few moments, because once I tell you what this is about, then it pretty much reveals what this is, and some of you might use that as an excuse to not do it. If you want to do some shadow work here on the spot, pause the video for a few moments and follow the instructions I gave you. When you're all done, erase or cross out the name that you wrote on the piece of paper. In its place, put down your name. Et voila! Meet your shadow self. Of course, there could be so many more traits that make up your shadow self, but this could be a great place to begin. And for those who haven't really done shadow work just yet, you may be protesting right now or feeling puzzled, but I do my absolute best to not be these things. In fact, I have a really strong dislike of these. But that's just it, see? Within each of us exists the possibility of going in any direction, being any which way. What happens is we choose how we want to be most of the time. And sure, it's quite possible that there are some traits or ways of being that we never exhibit in our lifetime. But those that trigger us, those that have an extra strong charge, why is that? That could be a great place to embark on a healing journey if you haven't consciously done so yet. And for those who are already consciously healing, you can incorporate this into your healing journey. To give an example, it could be that you wrote on that list, one of the traits you really dislike is lying. And so you might pride yourself on being a very honest person. And so, okay, you're honest, right? Well, how about you admit to yourself now the times where you've lied in any way, shape, or form. And there's no judgment here. This is simply about awareness. And after you do that, now you can see you are capable of lying. Do you choose to do it all the time or often? Maybe not. But yes, if you allow yourself to see it, admit to yourself that you have done it. And you can examine next where that strong charge that it has for you came from. Someone might say they were punished severely for lying when they were a child, and that made them declare that they hate liars. And from then on, they shoved the part of themselves that is capable of lying so far down that they're in denial of it. Because see, while we're not advocating lying here or chronic lying, wouldn't you say that depending on the situation, it might save your life if you knew how to lie? And many traits that become our shadow are that way. They aren't inherently evil or bad or negative. Maybe you've done too frequently, yes, but in the right context, they could serve you. Debbie Ford, who was an author and teacher on the shadow, gave being a bitch as an example of this. Many people don't want to admit that they have a bitchy side. They pride themselves on being easygoing and anything but bitchy. But see, if we owned that we were capable of being a bitch, it could possibly help us, like when we need to move things forward. And whoever we're talking to needs to see that side of us that's capable of leading, and maybe even being a little pushy, so that they can get things done. Like when we book a service, for instance, and we feel like we're being taken advantage of. Wouldn't it be beneficial to have that side that you might consider a bitch rear its head even just a little bit? This is all case to case, of course, but that's something for you to think about right there. Moving on to our second card, we have the Six of Wands. And yes, the glare is pretty strong, so there we go. I think just to keep it uniform, even though there's no glare on this one, I'll move it forward as well. Okay. The Six of Wands is about achievement, recognition. If we take a look at the witch in the picture who's being recognized, she seems to be a little bit maybe shy or sheepish about having all that attention on her. So what I am going to ask you now is, what might you have achieved that you haven't allowed yourself to accept recognition for? Or maybe it's been difficult for you to accept the love that came with that recognition. Here's an opportunity to accept that, even if it's from yourself. Even if there isn't any crowd around you at the moment, all the cheering from all the people in the world doesn't really make a difference anyway unless you allow it in some shape or form. If you blocked that celebration of you out, well, it still resounds. And if you open your heart to it now, if you open your energy to it now, you could still reap its benefits. Sometimes those of us who don't think so highly of ourselves don't allow ourselves to be loved and celebrated. We might not even take the time to acknowledge when we hit a milestone or achieve something important, hit a goal. So yeah, think back on what you've worked hard on that you didn't allow yourself to celebrate or that you didn't look at as a win. Even though, if you be objective about it and step back from it, you know it is. And for some out there, this could also mean taking a look at who in your life you can celebrate, who in your life you can applaud. Maybe you know someone who is the kind of person that we mentioned earlier, who doesn't want to draw attention to themselves, even if they achieved something huge or worked really hard on something. But you know that giving this person acknowledgement in some way would nevertheless be an awesome thing. I would say too, though, of course, take a look at your relationship to that person and how well you actually know them before you give them any sort of acknowledgement. Because what if you don't know this person all that well and they're not ready for that big party that you've planned, right? Whereas maybe a really close friend of yours, although they don't like calling attention to their achievements, you know that they do appreciate it if you would throw them a party. Maybe that person that you don't know as well, sending them a card, a brief message, or having a little uplifting chat with them is more than enough. So yeah, maybe there's someone that you can do that for, but at the same time, think of how that may have been you as well in the past. Or maybe for some of you it's going on right now, and you're realizing that you would like to accept that love now that others are giving you. The compliments, the acknowledgement, the celebration. And even if no one else does it, you can send the message to yourself that you are important and loved by doing it for yourself. Card number 3 is the Seven of Swords. If you take a look at the figure on the card carrying the swords, something seems to be sort of off. Well, you know what? The thing is, you just don't know. Sometimes when we look at something, we might have a judgment of it based on the moment that we come across. Like here, we could be suspicious of that figure. Are they stealing the swords? Or is it just a matter of they're bringing the swords back in, putting them where they belong? I would say there are 2 meanings right now that I can give you to think about based off of what I just mentioned. One of them being to be alert. So, what in your life right now might be suspicious? And we are not saying here to treat the other party, if there is one involved, as though they're guilty. Just keep an open mind as to what might really be going on, instead of, especially for those of us who want to think the best of everyone, thinking that the other person couldn't possibly be that mean or that sneaky, right? But the thing is, especially with people that we don't really know, we don't really know. So for example, in a very new relationship, or even not a relationship, but let's say you started seeing someone, if they're love bombing you, giving you so much attention and affection, it's almost unbelievable, and it's like you're the most important person in the universe, but you just met yesterday, or even if it's a few days ago or last week, maybe you'd like to ask yourself how that might be a little much right now. Sometimes in a situation like this, those of us who have never quite been in a healthy relationship or who just want so badly to be loved accept the situation as something totally wonderful without questioning it, because we don't have any idea that love bombing quite possibly is more than a little suspicious. There's a lot that you can learn about it by looking it up, so we're not going to get into that now. But yeah, what in your life might seem a little weird? Again, we're not necessarily saying someone is guilty. It's simply a matter of being mindful and aware of what's going on. And then the second thought to ponder is, where in your life might you be jumping to conclusions or being too judgmental? That's the flip side right there of what we just discussed. And it's keeping things balanced. That way, even if we do allow ourselves to be alert, we can also call ourselves out for when we might have overstepped. Some parents, for example, when they meet the new person that their kid is seeing, as in dating, it's only normal to keep our eye on them. But as time passes and they've shown themselves to be trustworthy, that could be a signal to us to at least take that into account. I'm not saying drop your guard entirely, but at least give credit where credit's due. And something else worth mentioning here is, sometimes we allow our imagination to go wild. For instance, if your significant other begins to act in such a way that so isn't them, rather than jumping to the conclusion that, oh, they're cheating, which for someone who has undergone the trauma of that in the past is understandable, of course. But maybe, despite that, you can consciously make the choice to have a conversation with them instead, rather than immediately allowing your fear to get the better of you. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. While it's still in time for the week, I posted this a little later than I normally do because I have a lot going on in my life right now, but I still wanted to do it, so here it is. And yeah, despite all the stuff that's going on, I'm still super excited about bringing you videos on tarot, healing, self-awareness, shadow work, and the like. So stay tuned. And if you enjoyed this and like the other videos on this channel, do subscribe if you haven't yet, and get notifications too so you don't miss a thing. Thank you! I'll see you again soon. In the meantime, take care of yourself. Bye for now. More Diaries of a Witchy Creative Life are coming soon.